Toronto Book Expo and the Ottawa Book Expo in our continuing series of interviews of authors and other members of the publishing industry. Today, I'm going to interview a gentleman. His name is Raymond Samuels. Raymond is head of Agora Publishing, which is a nonprofit organization that helps authors produce, publish, and market profitable and high-quality books. So Raymond, who I've known for a little while now, has his honors degree in international relations and labor relations from University of Toronto, and he also has a master's degree in international affairs, I believe, from Carleton University. And he is the author and editor of dozens of published works, and mainly on social commentary and political history and on politics. And when I Googled him, I have to say that he's a very modest man. So, Raymond, I'm sorry to embarrass you that way, but I think it's important that we just give you an appropriate introduction. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and Agora Publishing?
Yeah, so thank you very much for having me, Sam. So I started Agora Publishing, as you mentioned, a not-for-profit organization because I was interested in an organization that would help empower writers who were seeking to self-publish, because I found that when I started the Agora that there were many writers who were having problems in producing high-quality books. So I brought together Agora as an organization that would serve the community of authors and writers who are interested in publishing high-quality books and not the types of low-quality books which have problems in obtaining commercial success.
Okay, so we want to get as most out of this interview as possible. So what are some of the most important things that a prospective author must do in order to prepare to self-publish? So are there definitely some things that they must do, like pre-marketing things, some print things, some marketing things? Can you start from the beginning, please?
So when an author who's interested in self-publishing, and again, if I could step back a bit, the two choices that authors have is to either go the traditional publishing route, which is to send your manuscript to a traditional publisher. But the problem with that is that publishers these days are not, generally speaking, accepting unsolicited manuscripts, so that a lot of authors, face the heavy prospects of being rejected. So when you're doing self-publishing, is an opportunity which enables authors to be able to publish without going through that board of censorship and restriction. But when you're starting to embark in the self-publishing, the first thing I advise authors is they want to look at their self-publishing venture as just like you're starting off a business. You have to basically conceive of what your ambitions are, how much money you're going to put in, and how much you think you're going to expect to grow your business, so to speak, which in this particular case would be your book. So that's the first thing I advise authors. They definitely want to, if they can, develop some type of business plan. And once they have in mind how much they want to invest in the book potentially to self-publish it, then there are steps that they need to go through in order to make sure that their book is going to be quality production.
Okay, what are some other advantages to self-publishing? I know there's concerns with plagiarism or having ideas stolen. I know there's concerns with losing one's rights and creative influence on one's own work. Can you talk about those concepts as well?
Yeah. So there's authors that have come to me about issues of plagiarism. They want to be able to copyright their book. So again, if you spend all that time, it's a hard-working author writing that book, you don't want somebody stealing it. But the problem with that is that if I could just go to a story that an author had told me.
Please.
Yeah, so she was an author who was actually a lawyer, and she wrote a book and she confided with somebody who she thought she could trust in the editing process, and they were well connected. And this particular individual was also connected with a big American movie house, and this movie house loved her script so much they decided they were going to steal her book right from under her. And she told me that they were so bold about it that they taunted her, said they were going to steal her book and there's nothing she could do about it, even though she was a lawyer. And the reason why that is that you can't really copyright an idea. And even if somebody completely lifts your whole book verbatim, then as an individual, you have to have the money to defend yourself in court in order to affirm whatever copyright you have. So your copyright is going to be only as strong as your ability and your financial resources to defend it in court, even if you're a lawyer. So the problem with that is best when you're dealing with volatile materials such as your book to not rely on any sort of copyright you think you have, and just to keep it to people who you think you can trust professionally and otherwise. Because organizations will either tweak your book around so that he says, well, it's just a coincidence that my book resembles your manuscript. Well, they'll just steal it if they think you have enough money to defend yourself and hire big-time lawyers to affirm your copyright.
What about loss of creativity? What about loss of influence on your own work and having, say, a publishing house or an editor insist on you making certain changes? What about that possibility?
Yeah, so if you're going to a traditional publishing house where you're not investing your own money and the publisher's investing their money in producing your book, then you have to be concerned about them. They will want to, say, well, you can't say that, and they'll sort of take hold of the contents of your book and want to manipulate it the way in their vision is for your book. So when you do self-publishing, you can completely control the process of making sure that whatever message you're trying to put forth is not altered. But the problem is that even if you go to some self-publishing houses out there, they might want to change certain things which they believe might detract from their particular sort of corporate space. But even more of a challenge for authors is there are some self-publishing houses out there which will actually steal your intellectual property. They'll get you to sign a contract and sign away your rights, so you think that you're given to some reputable organization that will help you in the self-publishing process, but they're just there to steal your work. So you have to protect yourself from any contract. You have to read it thoroughly to make sure that they're not trying to steal your work. And this is why, again, I started Agora, because I wanted to make sure that we're focused on community, not trying to profit and exploit the works of authors.
So, Ray, then, what are some of the differences concerning the types of works published? So, for instance, nonfiction versus fiction versus technical, in terms of the benefits of self-publishing versus trade publishing or big box publishing.
Okay, so there, in terms of like all of those three particular genres, all self-publishing offers advantages to all of those, to technical. I mean, if you're somebody who's a technician, an academic, you can, self-publishing assist you in being able to execute your work in an expedited fashion without having to necessarily go through lengthy peer review and other types of processes which you think might slow your work down. For nonfiction people, the advantage of self-publishing is that if they have a very politically volatile message, they won't have to worry about it being censored by one of these big publishing houses. And if you're a fiction writer, then the advantage is that you won't have your work potentially, edited, certain things edited out, which you think might be a valuable part of the storyline. So the big difference becomes in self-publishing is that there are different marketing techniques you would use for nonfiction, fiction versus technical, but all those three areas have advantages in terms of self-publishing.
Okay, now I remember you stated once that it's very important to have a clear vision of your work. Can you elaborate on that a little bit here?
Well, in terms of the clear vision, I mean, when as a writer and you're publishing a book, the general idea is that you want to communicate a certain message to an audience, and you want to make sure that whether it's through fiction or nonfiction or technical, you want to make sure that the message you're trying to communicate is clear, concise, and conveys the ideas that you're trying to present. So definitely it's important to have clear thinking, to have your sort of goals firm, and to have, in terms of a vision, have a clear sort of roadmap of where you want to go and what you're trying to accomplish, and making sure that the presentation that you have is a quality professional one, and you're not, because if you have a wishy-washy vision, then it's going to be less effective in your marketing of it, because if you're not thoroughly impressed by your work and it's not thoroughly clear in your own head, it's going to be not very difficult to sell out why other people should buy it.
Right, and so even stylistically, you should probably have a clear vision of what you want to portray. Is that correct?
Yeah, clear vision. If it's a fiction, clear vision of the characters. If you're doing a fiction, I would advise strongly to have a substantive editor to make sure that the characters are all doing what they're supposed to, and the substantive editor will catch things that you won't, as an author, catch because you're so wrapped up in the story. It's good to have another pair of eyes to be able to critically say, well, what happened to that character that disappeared here and magically appeared? That doesn't make any sense. So substantive editors are particularly good for fiction work. They're sometimes good for nonfiction too, but if you're a nonfiction writer, you can more likely rely on just a basic copy editor to make sure you have your grammar straightened, your sentence structure, stuff like that. But if you're doing a fiction book, then I definitely strongly advise a substantive editor. And in Agora, we have high quality, very professionally trained copy editors and substantive editors to make sure that you get the type of quality that you're looking for as an author.
There were a few more things you had mentioned in the past concerning pre-marketing, and one of them was an ISBN number. Another was a CIP number. Can you elaborate a little bit on these needs, these potential benefits to having for your book prior to publication?
Yes. So the ISBN is a sort of to put it in a very simple way, is the equivalent of if you've gone to the supermarket. You see those UPC codes in the back, and the supermarket scans it, and all of a sudden the price shows up, and the supermarket uses it to control inventory. So when you scan your item, the supermarket will know, okay, we have instead of having 50 peanuts, we have 49 bottles of peanuts. So the same principle with the books. The ISBN sort of informs the bookseller of how much books they have in stock because they scan them in. So when you sell your book, the bookseller is able to track your how many books they have in their inventory of your particular book based upon the ISBN number. The ISBN number also identifies your unique title and all the unique aspects about your book, because there are a lot of books out there that have similar titles. So when you're talking about similarities, the way in which a buyer can distinguish between your title and another author which has a similar title is by the ISBN the ISBN will also indicate the format of the book. So if you're going to do a hardcover, a paperback, and an ebook, and even an audiobook, you'd have different ISBNs for each of those formats, so that somebody who wants to order your ebook will be able to distinguish between an ebook and the edition of your book that may be in hard copy and these other formats. So that's what an ISBN is useful for. Now, there's some writers, they go through Amazon KDP. If you go through Amazon, you don't, they have their own internal ISBN, not an ISBN, but their own internal number that KDP issues. So if you go through KDP, you don't need an ISBN, but your book will be limited to only being sold through the Amazon Kindle system.
Okay. What other differences are there in terms of how you obtain your ISBN number and how your book eventually gets presented?
Okay, so the ISBN number in Canada, that is provided free of charge through the Library and Archives National Library System. But if you're going to register your own ISBN, you would have your own sort of, you can either register it under your name or an organizational name. Agora, for example, for authors who don't want to go through that process, we assign the author's book an ISBN free of charges, and they will have an ISBN to identify their particular book if they want to use Agora as a means of identifying their book. The CIP used to be used for self-published authors, but the National Library of Canada stopped doing that for self-published authors. It's the cataloging and publication. So now self-published authors can still get the ISBN to identify their book, but they can't get CIP anymore.
Okay. Now, you mentioned the importance of the title. Do you have any tips on choosing a title and what makes for a marketable title for a quality and profitable book?
Generally speaking, that's subject to the preference of the author, but definitely a title that's evocative, that stands out, that immediately sort of inspires the curiosity by their target audience. That in general would be a title which I think will be most marketable to as far as a book. I definitely, for any author, they might want to talk about their families and friends, people that they trust professionally, what suggestions that they might have if they're not sure about a particular title. In general, a title shouldn't be too wordy, it should be as succinct and evocative as possible.
I love bookstores, old bookstores, new bookstores. I've been known to lug 70 pounds of books out of used bookstores in New York City, back home to Canada, and much to my parents' chagrin when I was very young. But how important is it then to catch someone's eye? Because I know that we're human, and even though I try to look at books and you say, don't judge a book by its cover, we tend to do that, right? Anthropologically speaking, we look at something and there's one of several things that we will judge very quickly, right? And how we'll feel very quickly. So what are some of the qualities of, as you say, an evocative book cover? You use the term describing a title, but what about an evocative book cover?
Yeah, so that's an area that many self-published authors sort of miss the boat. They fail in that. They fail in appreciating the importance of a book cover. Just like you said, the old saying, "Don't judge a book by its cover." But that's exactly what people do when they're looking at a book. The first thing, because it's like a first impression. It's like if you're seeing somebody, let's say you're a guy or a lady, and you're interested in and them as a potential significant other. There's certain things it's immediately going to catch your eye, and that's exactly the kind of approach you want to use when you're doing a book cover. Now, most authors what most authors do, which I do appreciate because they're trying to cut down on their budget, is that they end up just doing cheap everything. And a lot of self-published authors, they're so self-congratulatory on just getting a book out that they don't appreciate that, if you spend only like $49 or $9.99 or some price like that on a book cover which has clip art, that's not the way you're going to make an impression. Now, if you're an author and you don't have strong ambitions about your book, it's just something you're doing for family and friends, you don't have to worry about these sort of considerations. But if you have big ambitions, which many authors do, and they spend they just sort of they just go for cheaps with the book cover design, and that's automatically going to make your book falter, because if you're trying to get your book in a bookstore commercially, and not just like the individual buyers, and they look at this and they immediately say, oh yeah, that's a self-published book, then you've immediately lost the boat right there in terms of being able to get your book sold in places like Chapters in Indigo in Canada, or in the States, Barnes and Noble or Waterstones in England. So you have to have so in terms of a book cover, you want to make sure that it's customized. Avoid just simply just going in online and just getting some image and clipping things together like clip art, because A, it doesn't look good, and B, you're going to be running into definitely a copyright violation, because even though we were talking about before, it's difficult to copyright the contents of your book as far as the text, it's very easy for an artist to copyright their photo. So if they catch your photo being used on their book without their permission, then you just simply went and got online, and you can be in some serious legal trouble. So you want to make sure you have the rights to any photo you're using, and you want to make sure that you have a nice aesthetic of your book that doesn't look like some cheapy, like a lot of there was a very good article written by a particular writer, 25 Things to Know About Self-Publishing, if you can Google that.
David Carnoy, yes, David Carnoy. I've seen that, yes.
Yeah, that's right, David Carnoy. He said that 98% of self-published books are just terrible, 1% is very good, and 1% excellent. So at Agora, we make sure that authors' books is in the 1%. In terms of, as a general rule, for example, the book cover, you want to make sure that it's scalable. And what that means is that the book cover, when you see it in your hands, if it's shrunk down to the size of a thumbnail that would be advertised on an online bookseller, it should look just as good small and as good in your hands. It should be scalable. It shouldn't just look like when it's shrunk down, a indiscernible, mush of what is that image, and I can't read that, and that doesn't look very good. So scalable means that when you expand it and shrink it down to a thumbnail, it should look just as crisp. So that's the first rule of thumb. Second rule of thumb, avoid, definitely don't use images you're not sure who has the rights to. Thirdly, even if you're sure of the rights, avoid using some crappy, put together clip art images, and that's not going to look good. And make sure that when you're doing your book cover design, make sure you get somebody professional to put together the text, because even if you have a stunning image, if you have poorly typeset cover, it's going to look terrible. So you have to have a professional aesthetic, has to have all those 4 things in mind when you're doing book cover design. I know, for example, when I was in the Byward Market, I had an author's hand, an author that was, we were sort of, he was speaking to his wife. I was standing in the market, and somebody had just came up to me, oh, where can I buy that book? It was the cover that we've been working on. And she was immediately awed by the cover. And even though it was a stranger standing there, she had to come up to me and ask me where she can get that book. And his particular book sold out at the local bookstore in Ottawa. So so you want a book that people, when you look at, it's stunning like that, and it immediately inspires them to have an inkling of what's in the book. You don't want a book cover that's just like, that sends a mixed message. What's that about? You want something that really inspires people to really know and connect with the contents of the book.
Right. So the moral of the story is people do judge a book by its cover.
That's right. They judge the books by its cover. That's right.
Quality book with an evocative title and an evocative cover. And is there any way that we can prime the market or the purchaser prior to getting your book out there? Is there some way to get information out there, Ray?
Yeah. So there are ways of getting information out there, but before we even get to that stage, in terms of the thinking of the book production process, definitely, as you mentioned, the book cover is important. The second element I should mention is the copy editing. That's critical. Mm-hmm. I've picked up self-published books where I could find typographical errors, spelling mistakes, and all sorts of other stuff, grammar stuff, within the first 5 minutes. So definitely, that's not what you want. People have told me, I went to a copy editor already. There are some copy editors out there who will charge cheap because they know they're not going to hardly look at your book and they'll just want your money. So You might get a copy editor you think is a good deal, but if the copy editor is just going to steal your money and is not going to do a thorough job, you're just wasting it. So you have to have great copy editing. If it's an illustrated book, you definitely have to make sure you get it so a good graphic designer and a typesetter. Even if you have no images in your book, you should try to get it professionally typeset, because again, a lot of writers think they can just slap together a book cover and do a laser print job at home and just get it done in a very rough way through KDP, and presto, you have your book. Well, legally and technically you have a book, but it's not a very good one, because if you have like ugly, homely, looking amateur book cover, poor copy editing, your images and your texts are not meshing together. Like I saw one self-published writer, she had text and images with no captions in it. That doesn't look good. It doesn't make sense having like a book and you have all these photos and there's no captions in it, unless you're doing some kind of interesting art book. But even so that's the disjoint right there. So you definitely, so copy editing, typesetting, graphic design, and when you think you've finished the process, try to get a professional to look at it just before you get it produced, just to make sure that it meets professional standards. So that's one thing I wanted to comment. Now, in terms of the pre-marketing phase you're kind of mentioning before, while you're going through that process, some authors, most self-published authors, what they do is that they'll go through a process, produce their book quickly through KDP, and then think that, the book's going to even market itself, or how am I going to market this book now? The marketing process should be ideally begun many months before you actually self-publish to generate a buzz about your book. So if you're going to publish in, so any writer who has a time horizon that they want their books to hit the street and to be produced within a year, then you should be starting to get the book pre-marketed immediately to generate a buzz about the book. So by the time it's out there and ready to go, there'll be so many people through social media asking about your book. So when it's out, there'll be buyers there waiting to get your book. So what I advise definitely is to go through sort of leverage your own social media, as well as create an author blog to connect your social media to the blog. At Agora, we try to provide a one-stop place for authors to do blog design like that, typesetting, copy editing, substantive editing, graphic design, all the different facets which are needed by a writer who wants to ensure that they're getting an A+ effort, so that by the time they've completed the process, they will have everything necessary and in place for them to potentially have a bestseller.
Okay, wow. So, you talked about copy editing, typesetting, and graphic design, and you talked about obtaining these services and how Agora can help. Can you be a little bit more specific? What are some of the dangers and pitfalls of trying to do this more, shall we say, independently? I've heard horror stories, to be honest with you.
Oh, what are the pitfalls of self-publishing?
Well, yeah, in terms of the copy editing and the typesetting and the graphic design.
Okay, so the pitfalls is if you're not an experienced individual with the book production process, and you try to produce on your own through KDP and other types of organizations that don't have a hands-on approach to the book production process, then you can end up with a book that's basically they've taken your money, but it doesn't meet professional standards. So again, you can have a book if you completely do it on your own, which or does not have a hands-on approach by these sort of third-party self-publishing agencies. You can have an awful-looking book cover. You can have a poorly copy-edited book, so that if individual or booksellers can find mistakes in your book within seconds or a few minutes, then you're definitely not going to impress a lot of people.
No.
So and then you can have as I mentioned before, like a book where you think it's finished. Well, look, you have like the images with no captions, or one of the rookie mistakes that self-publishing writers do is that they don't have the beginning of chapters lined up correctly in the book. So that's another big mistake. And we've had to actually redo many books by that's already went through supposedly multi-billion dollar self-publishing organizations, because they don't have a hands-on approach. They either have like a chat bots there and it's pretty much self-serve, or you have some people there, but they're not really ensuring that your standards are meeting the professional requirements that needed, that your book is going to impress a lot of people. Like, I've seen authors, they went through these big sort of self-publishing agencies and not copy edited. You have like paragraphs that should have been broken up, which are just one big blob. Then the author's complaining about, look, I got my book produced, but why does it have this blue tinge on it? And, why does my images look so small? And, complaints. And, you just Google these places and you'll see numerous complaints of poor quality paper because they go to China, and they have like a brown tinge on the paper instead of a nice bright pages that they want. They do everything cheap and it comes out substandard. And or the worst thing that can come up when they go to these agencies is they steal their work and says, we have rights to your book for the next 5-10 years, and you can't go to any place else to get it to get it redone, or lots of headaches like that, stuff that has to do with the contract.
Okay, well, we were talking about some pre-marketing stuff. Now, what about the difference in marketing a print book versus an ebook?
Yeah, so the print, yeah, so when you're doing marketing a print book versus an ebook, those are sort of different approaches. The ebook relies on social media. Again, I can sort of discuss that, another time,
Okay.
more detail in terms of the steps you would go through. But in a nutshell, there are lots of authors which are out there who are trying to self-publish, and they want to decide, okay, do I go to do an ebook or do I do a printed book? So what I advise authors is to do both. And the reason I advise both is that there's a lot of people these days who love using their e-reader and they love ebooks, but there's also a lot of people these days too, because there's been an upsurge in the in sort of the printed form of books, and there's more and more people who are getting back to tradition. You like the tactile, you like the feel of the book, you like the intimacy of the book as opposed to the more cold e-readers. So there's a lot of people like that. Some people are sort of more mature or older like that too, particularly when they remember the day when we didn't even have much computers or whatever. So I advise to do both and to sort of corner the market, try to use the ebook and their paperback, the hard copy, to sort of reinforce one another. So the ebook is good for social media, and the print book is good for, you can use it for social media, but particularly traditional media. If you want to get your book marketed and to be, you want to potentially get your book discussed or reviewed in the in the Globe and Mail, if you're in Canada, the CBC, National Post, all these dailies, or one of these, or the TV or radio, is nice to be able to send something in the mail, because that will impress them. If you just go to, if you're just sending out links, here's my ebook link to Amazon, or here's my ebook link to Nook in Chapters, or Nook is in Barnes & Noble, or Kobo in Chapters. That's not going to impress them. You're probably going to get deleted. So if you send them a physical copy to these traditional media, you're more likely to impress them. And when you're going to a book fair, a book expo, you definitely want to have a traditional book there, because your friends want you to sign your autograph. You don't want to just have an e-reader. Here's my e-reader.
Yeah.
Sign the back of your tablet. So that won't look good. So both of them have their markets for you to go to. So you don't want to just ignore one market and just do one or the other.
How would an author go about choosing a price for their work? And what are some of the factors involved?
So when they're choosing a price for their book, basically, as a self-published author, if you go the route of, when you're just printing up a whole bunch of hard copies, and you're trying to sell it and get it physically put in the stores on a consignment basis, the issue with that is that you basically have to print many, many, many thousands of books if you want your book to be competitive with the big corporate publishers out there. So print on demand, provides an alternative to authors, which enables authors to have a lower sort of price book. But basically, I would say from a general standpoint is that when you're pricing a book, you want it to be reasonably affordable and reasonably competitive with competing titles out there, which may be self-published or maybe corporate trade. So if you're doing a sort of let's say a novel of science fiction fantasy novel, and most science fiction fantasy novels are selling for, let's say, $14.95 or $19.95. If you start to sell yours for $29 and $39, then that's going to be, you're going to price yourself out the market. So you want to be as close as possible. I advise authors to kind of look around the booksellers online or in a store, bricks and mortar store, see what the prices out there are and try to be competitive with them. And basically the factors when you're pricing a book is that when you're pricing a book and you're sending it to a store, the bookstore takes a certain part for its own, to keep up the rent. So if your book is selling for $19.95 and you're in Canada selling it to, let's say, Chapters Indigo, Chapters in Indigo is going to want at least 40% of your retail price. Generally speaking, they'll probably prefer around 55%. So if they're doing in that range, then in your books and you're going to retail for $19.95, then you can rest assured that Chapters will probably be taking around anywhere between $7 to $10 at least from your book to pay its own rent. And if you go through a book distributor, they'll want another like 10 to 20% potentially. So that's another big chunk. And then there's the production cost. So as an author, you might, if your book is priced $19.95, there's a chance that you may only be getting, $1, $2, or $3, or from your book, depending on what retail price you have. So as an author, you want to factor in how much money you want for yourself. If you're an author, says, you know what, I just want my price to be competitive, so I don't mind getting only like 25 cents a book or $1 a book. I just wanted to sell. Or you could be an author and say, you know what, I worked hard, I want to get a little bit more and sell a little bit less. Then you can increase the price. You get more of a difference relative to what the book distributor is getting and what bookseller is getting. So these type of factors come in mind. If you're just selling it through Amazon, they have their own sort of a pricing structure there. But if you're selling it through the traditional bricks and mortar stores, they have to pay their rent and for them to have for your book to have the privilege potentially of being in their store.
Okay. Now you spoke a little bit about this already, but what role do free copies have in marketing your book?
So free copies are free copies can be a part of the pre-marketing process. So many successful authors, what they do is before their book is released, and even if they're doing print on demand, they'll send out their copies to influential bloggers. They call them influencers, the book reviewers, anybody who they think or organization they think is going to potentially talk about their book online or through traditional media. That's where free copies come in hand. So free copies are very good to promote your book and to help generate the buzz on top of the buzz you're trying to generate on your own.
Okay, now you mentioned this buzz and book reviews. So what role do book reviews play, and what advice do you have for prospective authors regarding book reviews?
So book reviews, definitely, there are two types of book reviews you can get. If you're giving free copies of your book out to different bloggers, reviewers, reporters, people in the media, the importance of reviews is them looking at your advanced copies and basically giving their honest review of what your book is about. So as a writer, you just have to be open-minded that you might get hopefully a good review, but there might be a chance you might get a potentially negative review. But some people think that, any publicity you can get, whether it's negative or positive, it's going to be good publicity or good promotion. So definitely the other type of review that you get as a writer is that once your book is out and individuals start to read your book, then you'll get reviews of people saying, what a wonderful book. And you see all these people from Amazon and Chapters and all, these online booksellers commenting on your book. So those will definitely reinforce people buying the book if you have individuals buying the book and making positive reviews. And they'll go to different independent sites like Goodreads and they'll talk about your book. So that's one strategy that you can use. At Agora, we also do a buzz about the book as well. We'll promote the book and get our sort of reviewers to kind of to draw readers' attention to this book is coming out. So this is a service we provide, is to we have independent reviewers who will write about the book and be able to, because a lot of writers, they'll send out their copies to all these big publications, and it'll get ignored because maybe they got a stack of about 100 books or 500 books in their office, or that they don't have time to. So sometimes as a writer, you get frustrated when you send out your review copies and you don't get it sort of, depending on what it is, if you're a nonfiction writer and you have an expose about a politician, you might be more likely to get one of these reviewers kind of writing about your book than if you have yet another fiction, science fiction, fantasy, or action suspense, or certain types of books are going to be more likely to draw independent reviewers' attention. Mm-hmm. So if you're one of those fiction writers which are in a crowded space of other writers in your genre, and you're not getting the attention you think you deserve from these reviewers, because there's so many of your type of book out there, and it's not really a newsworthy item, is going to then we at Agora, we'll definitely help talk about your book so that you'll be able to get some interest out there. So somebody will say, "Oh, look at that! That's a unique book. Why didn't I take the time to read that book? That was in my office." So that's the kind of service we do to get authors and to get the attention of potential readers, whether they may be bloggers or established people in the media or individuals. You never can tell who's going to be reading the reviews that we write on behalf of authors.
Okay. What other considerations are there for a prospective author who wishes to self-publish, Ray?
In terms of considerations, definitely the first question I ask writers who approach us or approach me is, what's your ambitions for the book? Are you, do you want to be a potential bestseller? Or do you just want to have your book circulated in your school if you're a teacher? You just want it for your family and friends? Because these will influence the amount of resources you put in your book. If you want your book and you have big ambitions for the book to be a bestseller, you think it's going to sell well, then I would advise making it more of an investment in the book to make sure that it has the professional aesthetic to be able to give it a basis of being able to sell well. If you're going to, if you have less ambitions and you just want to have your book for the community or for a small niche group, then you as an author, you might want to invest less in your book, and because maybe your book is not about commercial sales, it's about some community ethic, or you want to give out free copies. It depends on what your ambition is as an author. So I always suggest to authors that they want to take a sober look to reflect on what their ambitions are, and to try to, as best as possible, match the resources to whatever their ambitions are as a writer. Sometimes as a writer, you don't want to necessarily spend your money. Maybe you might want to do crowdfunding, or do some type of marketing approach to get your sort of raise money for your book. I always advise authors that a blog is where they want to go in terms of while they're completing a book. You definitely get an author blog, because the blog will get people to know more about you as an author. If you get interviews, you can say, check out my blog, and try to make it a short name. Avoid using these blogs where you're using some kind of WordPress extension or one of these blog extensions. You don't want your blog to be like johnsmith.wordpress.com or whatever. You want a nice short name, and you want to get your blog out there when you talk to the media so that people go to your blog and they can see your social media links and go to that. So you definitely should have a good, strong marketing approach. The stronger and higher the ambitions you have as an author, and to try to work out a marketing plan and a marketing strategy as soon as possible, and not wait until your book is out and when you want to sell it and nobody knows about your book anyway, and then you try to contact the CBC or Globe and Mail, wherever you're trying to contact, and that's immediately they're going to know that your book's a rookie book because you didn't market it beforehand. Books that are worth their attention will be known long in advance. So if you tell these established media, and if you tell them that your book is coming out in 6 months' time, then that's going to tell them your book must be important because you definitely have your act together, you're organized, you're planning marketing 6 months in advance or 10 months in advance. That's that author they're going to pay attention to. If you tell them, oh, my book just came out, we never heard about your book, they're going to say, oh yeah, another self-published writer, disorganized. Next, they're not going to pay much attention to you likely.
She didn't believe in me. She didn't believe in herself. Unless a man was near. The woman in the house was beautiful. Oh, so beautiful. She had her freedom, but was afraid to find a home.
Now, you've touched on a lot of specific things during the interview, and we still have another segment that I would like to introduce you to here. But if you had to narrow it down, based on your decades of experience in the publishing industry and as an author and editor yourself, what would the top 3 mistakes of aspiring self-publishing authors be, in your opinion?
Okay, so the top 3 mistakes are
in no particular order.
Okay, bad book cover, poor copy editing, and then the most important one that authors miss out the most on is just atrocious typesetting. Like the font's too small, the font's too big, too small margins, too big margins, incorrect incorrect layout of where of the book, the images and text don't go together. Chapters are starting off in the wrong part of the book. The typesetting is probably the absolute worst one because most self-published authors haven't even heard of typesetting. They understand book cover, they understand copy editing, but typesetting, that's Greek to most authors, and they'll say, I don't care about typesetting. I can just do it at home, whatever, do it through KDP, and that's the easiest way to tell a self-published book is the cover, yes, but even if you have a professional cover, you open up the book, copyright page, crappy, not lining up properly, bad paragraph spacing. You see these things before you even start looking at the editing mistakes with the book. Those automatically stand out. Yeah. So that's the second thing. So those 3 things they miss out on, I would say, and there's big strikes. So most self-published authors, you'll have at least 2 of those, and a lot of them will have like all 3 strikes on those.
Yeah. So based on those negatives, then let's juxtapose and come up with the 3 top positive or constructive things, which may or may not actually be the opposite of those. But what would the 3 most important positive actions a self-publishing author could take?
Well, a self-publishing author, the first thing they want to do, as I mentioned before, is to, there's the self-published authors. I like meeting self-published authors because they have a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of energy. So there are a lot of self-published authors out there who are trying to do an earnest job, in terms of trying to get their message out. They're ambitious. So, pre-marketing is what I emphasize when I meet authors. But I say that most authors I meet are very much open to wanting to market their book. But a lot of times I find self-published authors, they after they get the book out and they put their book on social media, they don't want to necessarily spend the effort. So it's kind of split. So a lot of self-published authors are earnest about it. They spend time going to the book fairs and doing everything they can. But there's a lot of self-published authors out there still who are thinking that a book's going to sell it by itself. Mm. And what was so there was so you wanted me to do the top three of
the top three. If someone could only remember three things today, what would those three things be in your experience?
Three things they're doing right.
Yeah. Three things to do right.
Three things to do right. Okay, yeah. So three things to do right. So
the top three.
So pre-marketing the book, having a good conception of what the book project is all about in terms of who you're going to be marketing to. So have a good conception of the book, then pre-market it and generate that buzz. And the third thing is to definitely to be able to have a good sort of financial management strategy, that you're not spending more than you need to on a book, but you're not so less that you're putting a stranglehold in your ability to do the things necessary to invest in the type of ambitions you have for your book.
Okay. At the risk of sounding like we have too many endings here, I'm going to ask you one more summary. What would your general takeaway be to summarize all of these specific points that we've talked about with here? And as I mentioned, we have another segment here planned for you, Ray. What would your general takeaway be to a prospective self-publishing author?
So again, one thing I didn't mention before is our website, agorapublishing.com, agorapublishing.com. So that's the kind of website which we have. What we have is that if you go to the top tab for writers who are checking out our site, it has a section called Book Self-Publishing Roadmap. And that roadmap lays out the step-by-step process that an author can kind of check to see if they're following the necessary requirements to ensure that their book's a marketing success. So if they go to that tab, they'll be able to actually check it off and to ensure that they're doing the things necessary if they have if they have an ambition to be a potential bestseller. So that's why I advise any author which is not sure and wants to have something in front of them. We have a sort of a check off, sort of a long list of things to check off, and we have an infographic to show the type of show the self-publishing process, sort of a roadmap of the process. Because some people are visual and some people are more into sort of the written forms. We put most of them together so that publishers should have self-publishing writers will have an idea of what they need to go through to make sure that their book comes out the way they would like it to come out.
Okay. By the way, just to clear the air, huge Tolkien fan here, okay? I wasn't meaning to diss Lord of the Rings. But we actually, Ray, have a prospective author on standby who would like to ask you some questions. Would you be willing to field some questions from our author who is waiting in the wings?
That's fabulous. That's a great surprise. And definitely, I'd be more than happy to be able to talk to an author. I always love talking to authors all the time, so it's fabulous that you have an author there ready so I can answer their questions.
I thought you would indulge us. Also, it allows for other authors to identify with the more specific questions and to make it a little more concrete. So if you just give us a moment, we're going to set that up, and we'll be right back with you, okay? Thank you, Ray.
Good. Awesome.
Okay. All right. Talk to you in a bit.
I'll see you. Okay.
All right.